Do you go by just Seth Hall?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, my Twitter and all my handles, the only thing was available was my full name.
Okay. All right. We are live. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and post this. We're going live with the Postpartum Wellness App. It would be super helpful if I spelled wellness right. Okay. And the link is... Gosh, watching your face on YouTube, like my own face, is something else. Okay. I posted it there. I am going to post it one more place and then
make sure I don't have any extra stuff open.
okay. We're here and we are ready. So, let's see. It's useful to unmute, I think, maybe.
Maybe,
but
yeah.
So today what we are working on is we are following up from our conversation before, right? Like earlier in this week, we went through and we got the Postpartum Wellness app set up on your computer, and we made sure we had an understanding of what the app was doing. And now we're kind of doing like a little bit of behind the scenes work for any open source contributors who are interested in making things to streamline the process from there. So do you want to tell us what issues you're walking through?
Yeah, so let me share my screen. And so yeah, we are going to work on two issues that Nick Taylor created. It's issue number 44 and issue number 45, and they're all kind of related. The whole idea of these issues is it's all internal dev experience focused, but it's also to commit the best code possible, to take care of any errors or formatting or build or any errors or formatting before the build, before it goes to production. So issue number 44, I'm going to start with 45. It makes sense for me to start with 45, but basically we're going to add Eslint and Prettier to the project. And then we're going to add some pre-commit hooks to help facilitate and help make sure that those linting and formatting configs are applied before we commit the files.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are things that just kind of help developers and make sure that everything is formatted properly. And basically we're all on the same page, right?
Yeah. So it's like no matter who across the whole world, no matter who commits or contributes to this, there are some guidelines in place. And it really is it's to remove the conversation about, well, how do we do this? Is it tabs or spaces or whatever? That's a big part of it, which is developer experience, but it's also to make the code cleaner and better just down the line. So,
sure.
I think it's important to point out Nick, the guy who created these issues, our friend Nick Taylor. He also has a great blog post about this. I'm not sure where we could share this link.
I will go ahead and share it in the chat.
Got it. He has it on let's share his personal blog here. But yeah, he's got it on Dev2 and this, and it just really was helpful for me. Like I knew I didn't really know fully the ins and outs of it. And I talked to our friend Dan as well about this, and he kind of helped me understand the libraries versus the linting within our code editor. But anyway, this blog post just really lays it out, and I'm basically going to follow what Nick has laid out here.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I'm going to post that in the chat now. And like Nick is a rock star. Jonathan said in the chat, clean code is the best code, and for sure. And sometimes it's hard to figure out what clean code is. And so like all of this stuff helps us to figure out how to, it allows for some of that to happen automatically, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it takes out the guesswork. We just don't even have to think about it. Our code all comes out the same. So the first thing, let's see. First thing we'll do is, what are we doing here? Okay, yeah. So here's the current code base. And this, again, this is a fork. I forked down this, and I think maybe at the end of this video, it'd be kind of cool to submit a PR.
Absolutely.
So the first thing we're going to do is just double check, make sure this stuff's not already in here. And I don't think it is. Okay, good. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install Eslint and Prettier. Okay, and again, I'm going to reference Nick's blog because he's kind of done this work for us, and I'm going to see what we need to install. And here it is right here. So Eslint, Prettier, Eslint config Prettier, Eslint plugin Prettier, Husky, lint stage, style lint, style config standard. The style lint and style config standard is like linting for CSS. So I'm not quite sure what the styling is in PPWA yet. So we'll go ahead and install it, and we'll just see what happens. So I'm going to say yarn add, and I'm going to do it as a developer dependency, dev dependency. And
can you explain what that means?
Yeah, basically the project, it's only during development that we depend on these things. It's not within the app itself. Like for example, React is a dependency, right? We have to have React to run the app, but we don't have to have like, correct me if I'm wrong, chat, but we don't have to have these things to really run the app. This is just what we need in development.
Right. Nice. They're like adjectives or something, like it enhances what you already have there.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe the chat can chime in with more stuff. But so I'm just going to go ahead and install these packages.
Excellent. We're going through all of the millions of files that need to install.
And I've got some stuff already pulled up here. So I've got the Eslint docs. Let me get the Prettier docs.
I just want to talk for a second about docs, because I feel like when I was first learning to code, lots of people were like, go to the docs, but they didn't really explain what docs meant, right? Like, it's like, what is a doc even?
You mean go down to the water and like go get a crab cake or something?
Right. Or like docs, like things people write or what, right? And so like docs are the official documentation of these things that we're using here, right? And so like Prettier goes through, they tell us how to use it. They give some great examples of what we need to be doing. They give some instructions, right? And so all of these things help us to figure out how we need to implement those things. And so when people are talking about docs, a lot of it is just going to the site of the thing that you're looking at to give you the official directions. I wanted to say the best, but often it's not the best, right? Like sometimes docs are really bad.
Well, that's the goal, right? For it to be the best. But it's hard to keep documentation. First of all, it's hard to write good documentation. It's hard to keep it up to date too.
Right. Yeah. And like, sometimes I love open source documentation, but if that's not well curated, then it becomes really challenging because it's disorganized and confusing because you don't know where things are going. So very much appreciate both well thought out docs and organized docs.
Yep, that's right. That's right. So we're going to need, so we've got the library, the packages installed. We're going to confirm that by going to our dev dependencies. All right, and we're going to see, we got Eslint. We've got these other things we installed, Husky, lint stage, Prettier, style lint. So we've got everything installed.
And so that's all the stuff you pulled off of that blog post, correct?
Yes, exactly. And the reason why I know that I followed this tutorial that Nick laid out for my own project. So I did this before, so I would have a better understanding. So I know that these are the correct packages to install.
Yeah.
You don't really want to blindly copy and paste something without really looking at it and making sure it all makes sense for you.
Absolutely.
And like I said, we could have left off the style lint stuff, and we might remove it later, but I just want to see, kind of get it in there and then see how you're styling and see if it can benefit us. Okay, so the first thing we need in our code base is we need an ESLint, ESLint RC, .js file, and that's just going to be an ESLint config file. The way that you could do that is create it manually if you want. I think there's a init. Let's see. Yeah, you should then set up a configuration file. The easiest way to do that is to use the init flag. Okay, so let's just do this.
Now I want to say, I want to point this out. So if you see what Seth highlighted, he did not highlight the money sign or whatever that's called. And I know for me, when I was first starting, I kept trying to highlight that. I'm like, why isn't this working? Right. And it's just an indication of this is where this code begins. So you always focus after that and then copy what you see.
That's right. And I've done that a million times. I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, the money sign.
Yep.
Okay, so let's just run this, and we should see ESLint RC JS appear in the code base, hopefully, right? Oh yeah, okay, here we go.
Hoping.
So this is cool. This is in the terminal. It's asking us how we want to kind of approach this config, and I think we should do all three. We should check the hold on. Yeah, check the syntax, find problems, enforce. Yeah, I think we should do all three. So we're going to do all three, and we're going to say it's React Native, so it is JavaScript, right? So we're going to do that, import and export stuff. There we go, React. And does it use TypeScript? Yes.
It does, yes.
Okay, so yes. And where does the code run? We're going to say browser, I guess. Yeah.
Yep, we'll go with that.
Okay, now here's another thing is ESLint, they're walking you through kind of setting up your config, and there are some existing style guides out there that are super popular. And so while I could go through and answer questions about the style or whatever, I'm just going to use a popular style guide. Yep. And the one I like is the Airbnb style guide. I'm not sure how Airbnb became the standard. It's sort of interesting to me that Airbnb specifically is a golden standard to ESLint, but obviously they did something and it worked for people, and now it's kind of a thing. So I would choose the Airbnb one, but you could also choose standard or Google.
And so that shows up for everyone, right? All three of those options should show up.
Yeah, this is the ESLint init walkthrough process that we're going through. Now, I don't know the difference between Airbnb, standard, or Google at all. And I'm the kind of person, I love defaults. I'm just okay, it works for Airbnb, it works for me, right? I don't, obviously that's not always the case, but I'm very comfortable with defaults. Create React app default. I'm just comfortable with it, and I just change things I need. So I'm going to say Airbnb, and I want the config file to be, let's do JS, yeah, JavaScript. Okay, so it's basically saying that the config Airbnb has some dependencies. Do you want to go ahead and install those with npm? I'm going to say yes, just to make it easy. And so it's now installing the dependencies for this ESLint config Airbnb.
Yeah, and so we need all of those dependencies, right, in order to run this and the way we want it to be run.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, so sometimes these things take a little bit of time, but it's nice that you don't have to install them individually, right?
Yep.
When I was working on this project, so I started Postpartum Wellness App, and then I took a long break. So when I started it, I knew no React Native and very little React, but I was like, this needs to be done. So I'm going to start it, right? And then last year when Virtual Coffee ran the Hacktoberfest event, people were saying you know what, you should try this out as a maintainer for this project. And so I thought, well, maybe I should. And then I tried to run this and it would not run because I hadn't touched it in a year. And so everything was outdated. And so I was going back and trying to update all of the things, and it was just broke constantly. no matter what I did. And so finally I thought, you know what? There's not a ton of stuff done here. I'm just going to look at what I've done and what I think can transfer over. And I'm going to start this totally over new as a new Expo app.
Yep.
And that would have been the best decision in the beginning, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I learned a lot because I navigated through all of those things and spent 20 plus hours trying to figure this out. But starting over just kind of gave me, it knew what I needed.
It's almost like a draft. Like you were talking about writing screenplays last time. You write a first draft, which is the first kind of iteration of your app, and then you go, I got to change a ton of stuff. So I don't even look at it as starting over. I just look at it as a second draft.
Yeah, I think that's such a good perspective too. And like Vic was talking about this on the Virtual Coffee podcast a couple weeks ago, where like, it's not a failed project because you've learned from it, right?
Yes.
Like, because you never start back over at zero, because now you have all of this knowledge that you've learned from the past and you already start ahead with every single project that you're working on. So it's never zero after that. And I just love that perspective. Yeah,
totally. Okay, cool. So there we see in our code base, where is it? There it is, .eslint rc.js. Okay. And, I'm not fully in my element with all this, but I have a decent understanding of what's happening here. So we've got some just default settings that Eslint provides. I don't fully know what they do. I couldn't explain them. I'd have to read the docs, but we're basically, there's some, it extends certain things, like, for example, the Airbnb config. We've got some plugins that we kind of want to add to it to help us with our formatting. So and then we have rules. Rules are important. And a lot of this, what we probably won't do is create all our rules, because we should, but I don't know the rules until I'm developing and I'm debugging the linting errors, right? Like I'm like, oh, what, like let's try to find an example. I'm just going to go to any file and see what happens. Okay, here's a perfect example. It says, okay, so in VS Code, you get these squiggly lines that kind of help you know there's an issue. So you hover over it and it says, it tells you exactly what the thing is. JSX not allowed in files with extension TSX, right? Which I guess is a strong opinion. So what I would do, it tells you kind of what the rule is. So there's a couple things you can do. You can go to Quick Fix, and it's tough. There's often a way to fix it quickly. There's often only 4 options, and this has a million options. So
I've never seen that many options. Let me just say, when I click Quick Fix, it's usually like you have no options or one other option. So
exactly, but they're repeated here too, so it makes me think there's something going on. But point being is that you would come in here and you would click, where is it? Click Quick Fix, and you could go to the documentation. You could fix it real quickly, or you could ignore it, right? So this is what I was talking about with rules. We're not going to go through in this stream right now and get every single rule correct, because it would take too long. But I'm going to go out to the documentation, and I'm just going to read about the rule. And we can read here: restrict file extensions that may contain JSX. It kind of talks about what's incorrect in this rule, what's correct in this rule. And then it tells you different options and stuff. Now, I find these sometimes to be confusing, these official documentations. I'm like, what's going on? Like, how do I fix it? I just want to know how to fix it, kind of thing. And sometimes they're not clear, but it looks like to me that I don't know how, I guess we'd have to add, there's probably like a rule we would add that would say, here it is right here. Here it is right here. So we would add, we'd have to add like a TSX file, file extension, and that would end up going in kind of this file. So I got to figure out exactly, let's see, rules. Okay, so it lists the rule. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna copy and paste this real quick, and then we're gonna have it formatted in here.
And I just want to say too, like this stuff is super tricky to understand too. And like even with the documentation, you can read through it and you still, it can still be very easy to not understand what they're saying. And so that's definitely something that happens to lots and lots of people. And so if you're going through these things and you're confused, it's okay. I am 100% there with you.
Yep, exactly. Totally. That's development. So what this does is it lists the rule out, right? So you got to have your it's basically, I guess, JSON objects, but you got to have your key, which is the rule, and then you have your value. I don't know what this one is, this array of one and extensions, and I understand extensions because it's just an array of accepted extensions. So we're just going to trust that I can copy and paste this right now, and I'm going to hit save, and we should go back to this file, and it should disappear. I forget which one we had. Do you remember which file we had? I think it was this one. So you see that it's there is no complaint now, right? Because we set the rule. There's other complaints. There's this styles complaint. There's all these things, which is when I set this up in my own project, I had to spend a whole day just going through all my files and removing all these red squigglies,
right?
Either by fixing it or by ignoring it. There's a way to ignore on a per line basis and a per file basis. Let me ignore something real quick, and we're just going to see.
So if you were setting up a project from brand new, then would you make sure that this got in there as one of the first things?
I would, yeah. I would say that part of the reason why I haven't done it in a lot of my files is because I'm the only one coding it.
Right.
And but it's a good habit to the recent project I'm doing as a side project. I put it in there, even though no one else may never be seen by anybody else. I went ahead and just put it in there for a best practice. So I would say, yes, it is a best practice to just determine what this is for your project and per team and kind of your company or whatever.
Yeah.
And once you set it, you might need to adjust the rules as you go, but like it should be to the point where it's just automatic. Everything's set up and everything's automatic.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. So set it up, figure out as you go, and it's okay to adjust and to change things.
Yep. Okay. So let me reference my thing here. All right. So I'm gonna just kind of copy and paste this here. There is the extends. I'm gonna add a few extends. Some of them are gonna be doubles. Just give me a second. And okay. So basically, and this is what Dan Ott helped me understand, is that like Eslint is going to be for your coding conventions, your syntax. I think syntax, like it's not formatting. Prettier is your code formatting, which we'll get to in a minute. But Eslint is like, I forget the terminology, but it's so in other words, they have to work together. So you have to use some extensions to help them work together, I believe. And I want to add as a plugin, I'm also going to add Prettier here. Yeah. And so again, this is where I don't know some of the workings behind it, but I know that you add plugins and you add extensions to help it work together with Prettier and with even other things that might come up. So,
yeah. And I think too, so much of that is part of the process, right? Like sometimes you just know, like, I know that I have to do this thing, right? And then you do it because you know you have to. And like, I've always found that sometimes down the road, things like click. Like, so even though, sometimes I know I have to do it, I'm not exactly sure why. And then as I get further on in my career, I'm like, oh, okay, yes, that totally makes sense to me in this moment right now. But there's a lot of things that it's okay to accept. Like, I don't totally understand this. I just know that it's a role.
Oh, it's like 100%. It's like Webpack. Like when I do a create React app, I've never created a Webpack config file ever.
Yep. That's a great example.
That's part of what I need to, as I'm progressing development and I learn, I will eventually probably do a custom Webpack configs. But right now I just create React app and I trust that Webpack is doing what I want it to do. Right. And so it kind of helps sometimes to go, well, as a developer, I don't have to know everything. I just want to make forward momentum, forward progress. And then when it comes up, I'll figure it out kind of vibe.
Right.
Okay. So back to linting. Let's just add another rule real quick for fun. So let's see. Let's just see what these are. Let's see. And this is probably because there might not be anything in here. So let's see. All right. And this is another thing where I don't see a linting rule here.
Yeah.
Oh, here it is. Styles was used before it was defined, and the Eslint rule is no use before defined. So let's see what that says. Let's see. So we won't read all this, but basically this rule will warn you when it encounters a reference to an identifier that has not yet been declared. So you can see the benefit of these rules, right? And here's a perfect example of how to ignore it right here, just on the file. But I'll do that in a second. So I guess what's happening here is that, there's just no style. Oh, here it is. Just got to put this up top.
Yeah, and it's funny that's an error and super useful, right? Because I was working with another contributor who's preparing to tackle an issue, and one of the things they said was, well, for me, it would make more sense if this was at the top, right? Yep. And so Eslint agrees.
Yeah, and it's just because it's not defined yet. I mean, even though it still works. But you see the red squigglies went away, right? So another thing we could have done is, if you really wanted to have this be your convention and your pattern, you could come up here, you could go to quick fix, and you could disable for the line or for the whole file. And the line puts it right above the line, the file puts it at the top of the file. And so we'll see we're disabling that rule in this file because we like the convention of it being last. You could probably also go to your Eslint file and disable the rule on a per project basis if you wanted.
Right. Yeah, so that's interesting. I mean, it's been one of my issues too, right? Like with lots of contributors trying to figure out, like, how do we define these styles? And one of the issues that's there is, like, let's move all of these styles out into their own components. They're like a constants folder, right? And so that anybody who's a contributor can come in here and get a better idea of what's happening and what is expected in terms of styling. And so that's definitely something that I've been thinking about, but like, this is, another level of like, hey, let people know what's happening before they start tackling it,
Yes, exactly. I was going to say that, so let's remove it doesn't make sense to ignore this on one file, right? Because it's a whole, you probably have your styles object below your function.
In all of them.
Yeah. So, which again, it's fine. You just need to set the rule. So you see now how it could take, like, if I was going to submit a pull request, I can't just assume what I know these rules to be.
Yeah.
So I didn't really think about this before our stream here, but like, this would need to be like an internal discussion to figure out, okay, we want linting, we want Prettier, we want all the stuff we're going to get to, but we really need to know what the conventions are, what the preferences are, as opposed to me, some random contributor saying, here's how you should do it. So, but, and again, the Airbnb kind of extension is saying, here's some opinionated rules that we have, but we as a team would have to figure out what we want. And so the goal would be to go, I would feel like, for my completest brain, is like to go through the whole app and just determine every single rule and, and just decide it upon with the internal team. And then you never have to think about it again. Now, obviously that would take some time, right? To do that. But anyway, so for us to kind of know what linting is, that's kind of the basics of Eslint.
Yeah. And I want to say too, like, this is one of those things, if you're working on an issue and these things come up, then create another issue, right? Like, this certainly is something that can be referenced in the issue that Dominic put up about, like, hey, let's have a central place for all of the styles so people can see it. And like, that's just like another level of talking through these things with, new maintainers.
Yeah. And it really is about the internal team, because I'm a big proponent of having styles within the component. Because it keeps it all under one thing, or like a modules where it's a sibling of the component.
Yes.
But I've also worked in code bases where you've got a global CSS file.
Right.
And so again, there's no right or wrong way. They're all going to get the same result. But as a team, how do we want to have our developer experience? How do we want to experience the development of the app? And yeah, so that's like either you as the leader says, here's what we're doing, or there's a group of people that say, here's the pluses and minuses of it. Because some people don't like CSS and JS at all. People are really opinionated about that.
Yeah. And like for me too, like as I'm working through this, I am not great at CSS, right? Like it's not a strong point for me. And so, people who work on that on a regular basis, any feedback that I hear is super useful for me, because then I can kind of see it from this different perspective. Like, okay, this works for me, but in terms from like a whole group contribution mentality, this is something a little bit different. I need to keep that in perspective.
Exactly. So for me, this is why I'll tell you why I would like it's like a hierarchy. Like if I was here and I didn't scroll down, I'd be like, "Where's the style thing?" Oh, it's at the bottom. So that's why my whole argument for up top is that you just see what this is before you even get to the styles.
Yeah.
And I love this because there's nothing else. This is only CSS this file has, and I think it's great. But that's another stream, right? Styling and stuff. So let's move on to, so we know about linting. We know that there's some extensions. We know there's plugins to help it play together or work together well with other linting and formatting, I think maybe you could say. We know that we added one rule, which was super helpful. And we know that there's a million other rules you could probably add. So I think that's probably good for linting. Let's double check Nick's post. And let's see what he says about linting, just to kind of give it a good full circle. So Eslint for linting, front-end files, JavaScript, JSX, TypeScript. There are all kinds of rules and plugins for this, but the gist of using a linter is to keep your code adhering to your project standards and styles. So basically what we said. All right, so Prettier is for formatting your code. It is opinionated and offers some configuration, but it is minimal. For example, single quotes versus double quotes. One thing that's confusing is I think ESLint can handle single versus double, but the reason why you putting these plugins, Prettier extensions and plugins, is so then that can handle it, because I would think that that's more of a formatting issue as opposed to a linting issue. So the way we do Prettier is basically the same. I might just follow his thing here. It's basically just creating another config file. Let's see. I'll just go to the docs here real quick. It's probably like Prettier init or something. Install. And I might just create it by hand. I'll just do this in my hand. Okay. So we're going to do a Prettier rc.js. There's also, well, it's important to say that you don't have to create a config file if you don't want to. There is a way to where it has like a waterfall of how. Here it is, configure Prettier. Here it is. Okay, so you could do a Prettier key in your package JSON. You could do a Prettier RC file, or you could do this or this, and so on and so forth. So like it will check here first, and then it'll go here. So so it waterfalls down. I prefer a separate config file as opposed to having it in my package JSON. So, but we very well could, do something like like this if we wanted to, and make a little object there. We're going to do that with Husky and with Lint Stage, but I'm not going to do it with Prettier. So let's go here and create a new file, and let's call it Prettier. Let's see. There's no dot in front of it, so Prettier rc.js. Okay, and I'm going to go over here and grab. Like Nick said, they're very minimal settings, but I'm going to go ahead and grab this and paste it. So what this is again, I'm making a decision, right? I'm saying the width of our line is 80, right? In the actual code, we've got everything has semicolons. Everything is going to be single quote. Tab width is for trailing commas and everything. And what that means is when I hit save, it'll add all this stuff. It'll add a semicolon, it'll add a comma, and I think it'll just probably throw an error for the single quotes. So, but this is all the settings that I have in my current project. So that's not that much, right? I even did a little research before the stream and thought, what are the other configs? And I didn't find a ton that were like necessary. So I think this is pretty much it for Prettier.
Yeah, I use Prettier in almost all of my projects. It's like I've always been really happy with it, and it will auto update the things that I need to do.
Yep. So let's look at our file again and let's see. All right, so we're saying we need single quotes. And I don't think it applies to links. I think it might apply to like more
like HTML, like
okay, I'm sorry. So I just hit save and it changed everything to single quotes. So let me go back. So again, this is I don't know if this is a VS Code thing. I think it's a VS Code setting like that I have where it's like format on save.
Yeah.
And my default formatter is Prettier.
Right.
And then I've got the configuration file in my project that helps adhere to that. So you'll see that all these quotes, even though there's no error thrown for Prettier, I just hit save and it changes the singles.
Right. And it's totally valid to have it as double quotes, right? It's like a preferential thing, but it helps to keep things, stylistically uniform. And like you said, you can have one thing on your VS Code and it could be different in another project. And this makes sure that we're all on the same page.
Exactly. It's a project level. So there's like your code editor level, which everybody's is different. Your project level. I think that might be it. I wonder if there's any other particular levels there. But so, and I think the whole point with having these plugins is, and this is what Dan was telling me, it's like you're offloading the formatting to Prettier. And if you didn't include these extends and these plugins, Eslint would handle that. So you're kind of like, you're saying, do all the linting except the Prettier stuff, let Prettier do that kind of thing. Okay, so that's basically Prettier. And another way we could check it is like maybe the line length, like I think maybe that's 80 right there. I'm not certain, but I could come in here and change it to like 200. And I'm thinking maybe if I was to save, it would extend, but it's not working. So, but you get the idea on that. I think that's what that is. Do you know?
No, I mean, now that you say that, like, I think that's longer than 80 as it is now, but I wonder, what line length is dictated by, right? Because that was a link. And so, it's,
yeah, so it may
maybe formatted differently.
Exactly. So let's go to the docs, and it just says it's just when your line wraps, which is, so we're thinking the right way, but maybe the link was a special use case or something.
Yeah, I'm thinking because that looks large to me, but again,
there you go right there. You see?
Yep.
So I hit save and it goes to 80. Okay, my kid's back there. Thankfully we have crisp, right, to cut out background noise. Okay, so yeah, let's move on from Prettier. So I think we're good with Prettier. I think we're good with linting for now. And so now the next thing is, do you have a problem with like when you're doing Zoom that those little pop-ups get in the way and stuff?
Yes, it's so annoying. And then like the people on the screen can't see that you are struggling because like, well, I can't see these things, but the like little share tab is in the way. And so you have to like move it around, or like you have to move your video around to access what you want.
And people think like, can they not use a mouse? What's going on? Okay, so style linting is basically the same thing, but it's for styles. So let's skip that because like we noticed, I don't think you have a specific CSS file. You have the styles inside the component. So let's just skip style linting for now, because I think that's going to be a little more determining how to do it within JS or whatever. So we'll
once
skip
we get
that
down
for
the road
now.
a little bit.
Husky is another thing that Husky, let's just read this. It allows, it's Okay.
I don't know if it, I'm sorry, Nick, but I don't know if it makes it a joy. Makes it better,
Yeah, that's
maybe.
funny. That's funny. I mean, I thought it was a joy up until you said something. So basically, Husky allows you to run pre-commit hooks, is what it is. We're going to see that our hook is going to be something different. He just has echo high where it just console logs it. But basically, Husky gives you the ability to run processes before the commit, right? Which will, in those processes we're going to run, you're going to see lint stage. We're going to run Eslint and Prettier automatically. So let's say I'm a developer and I forget to do something with linting, or I forget. It's like another safety measure. It's like our files are config files or we're coding, but just in case, while we're committing it, we're going to also run those processes.
Right. You just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page at all stages, and this is going to help us all get there.
Yeah, and in theory, it could you could, I guess, like not worry about it as a developer and just worry about it when you commit it. But I don't fully trust the automation of it. Like, is it going to catch everything when I'm committing it, all that stuff? So anyway, for Husky, I am going to put these configs in our package JSON, and they're pretty easy. So let's see. All right, so I'm going to put it under our dev dependencies. I'll put it under private right there. Okay, so basically we've got a lint stage, which is the package, and we're saying that on JS files, on JSX files, and on TSX files, we are going to run ESLint. The fix is like an automated thing and like just fixes it automatically, and we're going to run a Prettier automatically.
So the nice thing about this is too, like if you don't have these things installed in your VS Code and you hit save, or if you commit it, right, then theoretically this should update it using those tools, right?
Exactly. So you'll see Husky allows hooks on a pre-commit, and we're going to run lint stage. And then lint stage says on these files run ESLint and Prettier, on these files run style lint. Okay. So the way that plays out is, let's see. The way that plays out is I'd have to change something. And this is what I actually haven't done on my own, but in theory, you edit a file, you've got 15 files you've edited. You've, I guess, done your best to make sure there's no linting and Prettier errors in the project, but just in case any slip through or whatever, these files will not commit until they until they run lint and Prettier. So I don't know if we can try to get that going through, but I feel like it might throw us some errors and be kind of troublesome, but we can try it.
Yeah, we've got 8 minutes because I have to pick up kids.
Yes, exactly. So let's just know that we're explaining what it does. And again, like anything, you're going to fine tune it. You're going to tweak it. You're going to figure out what works, what doesn't, and then you're going to get your flow going, and then it's going to be in your code base forever, and you don't have to worry about it. So, but basically that's it. Does anybody in the chat have any questions or any concerns or any other like additions that you can see?
I think so far everybody is just saying how they appreciate what's happening with these things like Eslint and Prettier, and how important that they can be to your project. And it definitely makes it easier, I think, if you're working with multiple contributors, right? Like if you're working by yourself, it's one thing, but when you're asking other people to contribute, these tools all kind of help to prevent any problems or complications or misunderstandings. Like in any way that you can reduce that friction is a good thing.
Yep, totally. So let's wrap up by reviewing Nick's issues. Okay, so he's just basically saying use Prettier. Here's how you would install it. Here's how you maybe have it work with ESLint. Here's some configs. Here's how you do it on pre-commit basis. And then he said, I wrote a blog post about this, right? And then we chimed in about how we could do this. So that's that issue. And then this one is, just the Husky side of things. So what I would do next, I think, if to make this a real world contribution, I would need to like talk with you about how heavy of the ruling, how many rules we put in. I would, configure all that. I would make sure everything works, and I would just commit it to my forked repo, and then I would submit a PR from my fork to your main repo, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I would go through and I would review it and make sure that everything looked okay, was working okay. There weren't changes in other files that I didn't expect them to be in. And then I would approve it.
That's right. And then we would be off and running.
Well,
cool. Well, that is something I want to do. So maybe you and I can just touch base next week sometime about like, what are the rules and how do we can do that? Because I don't have any problem, going through all the files and making sure all the red squigglies are gone. That makes me feel good.
I think that would be awesome. So I want to thank you so much, Seth, because this has been super helpful and definitely one of those issues that like I want to see happen, because it does make it easier for everyone who's contributing. And this is like nice to be able to like walk through it and talk through it and kind of get a general understanding about how we do things and why we do things. And I very much appreciate that.
Yeah. And don't forget, it makes it easier for the reviewer too, right? Because you're not going, the tabs are incorrect or the whatever. So it's down the line, it helps everybody.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I don't think there's any more questions. So I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to everyone who watched and who watches this replay. This has been very, very excellent. Thank you, Seth, for doing all of this work this week, two times we live streamed this week, which is
that's great.
Excellent.
Yeah,
so thank you.
Thank you, Becca, and thank you to Nick for the issues and the guidance. And we'll pick it back up next week.